President Trump is headed to Florida today to tout the benefits of a sweeping GOP tax cut plan ahead of tax day tomorrow. This coming as the president's approval rating has hit the highest level since his first 100 days in office. A new ABC Washington Post poll shows 40% of voters now approve of the president's job performance. That's up 4 points compared to January. Americans have a more favorable view of the president's handling of the economy as well. 46% say they approve, 48% disapprove. Joining us now, House Freedom Caucus member, House Foreign Affairs Committee member, Congressman Ron DeSantis of Florida. Congressman, good to see you. Thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Good morning. Good to be here.
We want your reaction on all of the above. Let's start with the poll numbers. What do you think is driving that for the president this morning? Your reaction?
I think a lot of it's just results. And it's interesting, you look at the poll numbers, it was up to 40%. But that was among all adults. The registered voters was even higher, was 44%. The Washington Post doesn't lead with that. So I think that the actual data is better than what the media would like us to believe. And I think a lot of that is driven by what has happened with the economy. It's also been driven by the fact that he's exercised leadership in national security matters. And, he's coming to Florida, and I think Florida's a good example. We've worked hard on the state to have low taxes, to have reasonable regulations. But now, with this tax bill, people in New York and a lot of the high-tax states, they don't have the subsidy anymore. Florida's going to be even more attractive for business. Maria, if you guys wanted to move the show down half a year to Florida, you guys would save a lot of money, trust me.
I would actually be happier, too, because winter will not quit here in New York.
Sure will not.
Lee Carter.
One of the questions that I've got, there's a Wall Street Journal poll out today where it's talking about the preference for control of Congress, saying that 47% want Democrats, while 40% want Republican-controlled Congress, which is actually narrowing from where it was. A lot of people were expecting more of a landslide, and I think we've seen that the polling has sort of, the Democrats have underperformed in the polls. What's your reaction, and what do you think your strategy is going to be moving into the midterms to make sure you guys keep control of Congress?
I think doing what we promised the voters we would do. If you're succeeding, then they'll see those results. But if you're not, because Democrats are blocking you, well, then you take that case to the public. And there's going to be a lot of Senate races in terrain that is favorable to President Trump. We just had our governor announced for Senate in Florida, which is a huge boon for us. So take the case to the American people, but focus on the issues that matter. I think just having been in the Congress since the president got elected and watched my Democratic colleagues, all they're concerned about is being kind of knee-jerk anti-Trump. A lot of them, I think, will run on impeaching Trump. They did a resolution to impeach Trump 4 or 5 months ago in the Congress, and I read it, and it was things like his Twitter use and his post-Charlottesville speech and things that just are not offenses, but that is kind of where they're going. And so the more we can highlight a contrast between a party that's ideas-driven versus a party that's driven by hatred of the president, I think at the end of the day, I think we'll be fine.
Congressman, it's Dagan McDowell, but what are your constituents saying about the disruption from the tit for tat on trade, particularly with China? Again, President Trump meeting with governors from farm states last week, and they're talking about subsidies to farmers, again, handouts. Farmers don't want handouts. They want a level playing field, but they want some certainty in how they're doing their business. And it looks like that the additional $50 billion in tariffs that we're going to slap on imported Chinese goods could actually include consumer products like shoes. They're going to be working on that at the White House this week. That would also hurt your constituents.
Right. So I think a lot of folks understand that could happen. But I think what they see the president trying to do is use that as leverage to be able to get greater access to Chinese markets. I just ran into some folks the other day saying, yeah, I'm a manufacturer, and, the tariffs are so much dissimilar between, if we try to send something to China versus vice versa. So I think if he can get some wins there where China's coming to the table making changes, I think that'll actually be a very positive thing, and it'll avert kind of going in an escalating tit for tat with the tariffs, which you're right, would end up hitting people in their pocketbooks.
Congressman Mitch Rochelle, I want to go back to the midterms and the sentiment of voters. The omnibus bill is adding considerably to the deficit, and you had a lot of Republicans who voted for it, and you had Republicans who didn't. But I want to get your take on whether or not that's going to become a big issue that Republicans are going to have to defend in the midterms.
Well, I think and I voted against the omnibus bill. I mean, I don't know how you pass a $1.3 trillion bill that's 2,000 pages and that's only been available for public inspection for 18 hours. I mean, it is really, really, I think, a dereliction of the Congress's duty to safeguard the public's money the way it was done. So I don't necessarily think it would be a big issue in a general election simply because the Democrats would do it even worse if they were in. I don't think anyone would dispute that. They would want more spending. I think the issue is going to be motivating Republican-based voters to come out. Yes, we can talk about the tax cut. Yes, we can talk about judges. Yes, we can talk about some good things. But there was a big disappointment amongst kind of the core Republican base that omnibus bill was passed because, look, think about it. When we only had the House, a lot of the bills weren't as bad as that. And then even when we had the House and Senate, but Obama, we managed to do a little bit better than that. And so we have all three branches, and you end up with a 2,000-page omnibus. That did, I think, demoralize the base. Hopefully we can get over that. But it was a problem. There's no doubt about it.
I mean, are you going to roll back some of that spending? I mean, is that actually realistic?
We have to try. I mean, the rescissions are there. Let's do it, and let's just see where the votes are. People say, oh, well, they're not going to get the 50 votes in the Senate. Well, let's see. But I think the House should absolutely move to do that. It would at least show that the folks who voted for it on the Republican side recognize that it was a highly imperfect product, and they're working to correct the deficiencies.
Congressman, we got to get your take on Republicans demanding the unredacted copies of FBI Director Jim Comey's memos detailing his meetings with President Trump. Today is the deadline for the DOJ to hand over those documents. House Judiciary Committee Chairman Bob Goodlatte has been leading this charge. Here's what he told me yesterday on Sunday Morning Futures over on Fox.
We're looking to receive the unredacted Comey memos so that we have the opportunity to see what Mr. Comey is telling the people in his book compared to what is occurring in terms of his recounting of his meeting with the president. These are in the possession of the Department of Justice and Special Counsel Mueller, and there's absolutely no reason why they should not be made available.
And of course, this after the ABC interview last night, Congressman, one day before his tell-all book hits the shelves, your reaction to the Comey interview and the memos?
Well, the memos should be turned over. This is such a farce. They've been stonewalling almost every request for months and months now. It needs to be turned over. If they're not, we should hold the official responsible for turning them over in contempt and just start bringing the weight of our institution down on the Department of Justice because this has just gone on too long. In terms of the interview, Comey is somebody who is very self-referential.